Were the Normans Vikings? There's a tricky question. Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. Now, as many of you know, I am a historian and former archaeologist. I have myself dug in Normandy and I have studied this period, particularly the Anglo-Saxon and Viking eras, but also Carolingian France and the Norman eras as well. I've studied them at school, at university, and ever since as well. And the question always comes up, were the Normans Vikings? And it's a really complicated question that lots of professionals are still trying to answer, even via the latest DNA research. So I'm going to give a relatively concise overview of this question. I'm going to look first of all at the people of Normandy. Do the people of Normandy display any DNA evidence of being Vikings, or should we say Norse, Scandinavians, Danes maybe? Do they show any genetic evidence of that today? And indeed, then looking at an individual basis, does a certain famous Norman actually appear to be a Viking if we look at his ancestry? So we're going to look at DNA and we're going to look at ancestry here to try and answer the question of, were the Normans Vikings? And if you want to play a game on your mobile or PC that has a formidable history of its own, why don't you try Raid Shadow Legends? Raid is the phenomenally popular turn-based fantasy combat game. The fact is that I've been playing Raid for a couple of years and I still love it as much now as I did at the beginning. It's great fun, it's always growing, they're always adding new stuff. With over 600 champions, tournaments, special events, arena battles, there's an absolute ton. You can just pop out the phone, play it, have a quick game, put it away again. So what's new in Raid, I hear you cry? Well, this month Raid's got an absolutely non-stop schedule of special events and activities, including the Forge Pass Season 3, with some amazing rewards on offer, including a limited edition artifact set. If that's not enough, Raid's bringing out some new champions along with some awesome looking champion skins for the incredible Madame Ceres. But wait, there's more big news! Later this month, Raid's giving everybody's favourite champion the upgrade he deserves. You might have seen his struggle for awesomeness in some of Raid's hilarious videos, but finally, Death Knight is becoming a legendary champion. It's something that we've all been waiting for, and I can't wait to see how Ultimate Death Knight turns out. So now's the absolute best time to get started with Raid. So if you click the description down below there in the description box, or you scan the QR code on screen, you're going to get some awesome bonuses worth $30. We're talking about the free epic champion, Vergis. 200k silver, 1 energy refill and 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard. So you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get into the game. Once you're in-game, all of these bonuses are going to be waiting for you up here in the inbox, and it looks like a treasure chest. And remember, this is only for new players and only for the next 30 days. So what are you waiting for? Get clicking or get scanning, and I'll see you in-game. So now let's get back to the question, the main question here of, were the Normans Vikings? And it seems very, very easy for people to go, oh, well, the Normans were just simply the later descendants of the Vikings. And in a sense, that's true. Okay, so right from the onset, we have to admit a few things. Firstly, Normandy was given to Northmen, and it got its name from the Northmen because they were essentially given that land. So they do have a basis in Vikings, if you want to call them that. The Norse, I prefer to say. And yes, indeed, the legendary and really kind of quite obscure character of Rollo, sometimes known as Rolf in some books, but Rollo as he's widely known today thanks to the TV show Vikings. Rollo, we could say, is the founder of what we now know as Normandy and what was Normandy throughout the Middle Ages. So we could say in that sense that yes, it has a Viking or at least Norse basis. We don't know an awful lot about Rollo. We don't even really know exactly where he was from. We don't even know if that was exactly his name. But the fact is that we do know that fundamentally it has a Viking or Norse basis in that. We also know, incidentally, that there definitely was Scandinavian, Norse, Danish input genetically and culturally and in terms of the ruling elite into what became Normandy. Okay, so definitely it has a strong connection to these Norse rulers. Yes, however, were the people of Normandy actually Norse? Were they Vikings? And indeed, the rulers. How Viking were the rulers after Rollo? Well, the first question about the people versus the rulers is very important to highlight because, of course, whether we're looking at Anglo-Saxon migration era, whether we're looking at the Frankish migration era, or anywhere else, essentially, often you have a ruling elite who are separate and have a separate identity, sometimes language, sometimes genetics, to the people they they rule over. This was even true later in period, for example, with the Tudors or the Plantagenets in England. So was this the case with Normandy? Was Normandy an area which was made up of mass migration of people from the Nordic lands into essentially what we now know as part of France? Or was it simply that the ruling elite were Norse or Vikings and the people were whatever had been there before? So essentially a mixture of Gallic and Frankish, Alemanni and other inputs. Well, that's where DNA can come to the rescue. And there has been a relatively recent study. In fact, there's been a series of studies for about the last 20 years, ever since DNA research really became a thing in archaeology. But there has been a relatively recent study which has published quite groundbreaking findings in about the year 2016-2017, and they're probably still continuing to research into this now, looking at the population of Normandy. So this study was a genetic study conducted by the University of Leicester, UK, and the University of Caen in Normandy, one of the major cities there. And it was specifically to look at this question. Now, in Normandy, there are certain place names and indeed surnames which appear to have a Scandinavian origin. And the researchers of this stated that they were interested particularly in men with Scandinavian sounding surnames that could possibly reflect this legacy. They give examples of these names like Gonfrey, Ingulf, Launfrey. These are names that aren't necessarily indigenous to the Frankish lands, and they seem to be interposed from outside, from Scandinavia. Now, they principally looked at the Y chromosome, which is why they were looking at men, because the Y chromosome is passed down from father to son in an endless line. Do we see a marked signal showing that there is a large genetic input from Scandinavia? Well, the results were not that conclusive, unfortunately. So without going into a huge amount of detail into the particular haplotypes and where they're most concentrated, generally speaking, they found that the majority of people they tested appeared to have basically a French signature. They didn't appear to be any different to people from other parts of northern France. There were some that appeared to have haplotypes that are most commonly found in Germany and Scandinavia, but that could reflect migrations of people in Northern Europe, and they're quite common haplotypes. And there were a very small number of people, a handful really, who showed haplotypes which are most commonly found in Scandinavia, but not entirely. So the upshot of this genetic testing was that essentially there wasn't much conclusive evidence of Scandinavian blood, if you want to call it that, amongst the men in Normandy. There was a little bit of evidence, but not a lot. So what happens if we actually look at some of the ruling elite? If we then assume, okay, if we take that at face value and we say that the majority of the population just remained the same people, maybe with some migration from Scandinavia, but they just mixed together, so they're very small in relation to the native population. Maybe the rulers were the Vikings, maybe they were the Norse, and whilst the populace stayed the same, maybe the ruling elite really were Vikings and they gave the name Normandy. Certainly we know that's true in the beginning. We know that Rollo was a Norse, was a Viking, probably Danish, but could have been otherwise. And so absolutely we know that we have their roots in that. But what about the rest of the ruling nobility? And more importantly, and this is what I'm going to look at, a few generations on, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations afterwards, could we call the Normans still, let's say at the time of the Norman conquest of England, 1066, by 1066, could we say that the Normans, the ruling elite Normans, were Vikings? Well, let's have a look at one very famous example, a certain William the Conqueror, known at the time as William the Bastard to many, or William I of England, or William Duke of Normandy. Let's have a look at William. Well, it just so happens I've looked quite a bit into William of Normandy's ancestry, because he happens to be one of my ancestors. If I actually pull up, and this is true, this is not in any way to boast, this is true of many English people. If English people have any roots anywhere in their family tree going back to the aristocracy essentially at some point, they very often will find that they have Norman ancestors. It's completely normal in England, and indeed looking at my ancestry, I go back via Robert Fitzroy to Henry I. Henry I was the son of William I, aka William the Conqueror. So if we look here on my family tree, I've got Henry I there, William I, and you can see it then goes to Robert the Magnificent, Richard II, Richard I of Normandy, William Longsword, and back to Rollo. So we can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations back to Rollo. Now we know, of course, that Rollo was a Viking, was a Norse man of some sort, probably from Denmark, but we're not certain. And we know his wife. We know most of the partners all the way to William the Conqueror. Now, so what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the origins of each of these generations going back in a straight line from William the Conqueror, who was let's have a little look, I think 28th great-grandfather. So the first thing we have to mention here is the elephant in the room, and that's very often we don't know very much about the mothers. And that's because if we go 1,000 years back in history, in some cases, the mothers were not necessarily the legal spouse of the person who produced the offspring, but additionally, sometimes the records aren't great and we just don't know exactly their parentage because it's not recorded. We don't have a huge amount of source material when we go back 1,000 years, but William the Conqueror was the son of Robert the Magnificent and his mistress or perhaps wife, Heleva. Now, there are lots of things said about Heleva, but essentially we have to say we don't know her parentage. However, it seems extremely likely that she was, in modern standards, French. If we do the easiest and most simplistic level of research here and just go onto the Wikipedia page for William the Conqueror, actually a lot of these historical articles of monarchs are updated by lots of people and have actually got a lot of good summarised information on. But we go to Heleva of Falaise. Now, there are lots of theories about her background, but fundamentally the first sentence says it all. Heleva's background and the circumstances of William's birth are shrouded in mystery. And there it is, really. We don't really know who she was or where she was from, although there are rival theories. So the earliest source to refer to Heleva is a 12th century, the 12th century Norman chronicler called Orderic Vitalis, and he writes the Gesta Normanorum Ducum, so the story of the Norman dukes. And in that, Heleva's father is described as Fulbert, but again, we don't really know anything about Fulbert. There's some suggestions that there's origins as a tanner, so he was a commoner, and Heleva is generally described as being the mistress of Robert I, Duke of Normandy. So given her relatively humble origins, whilst she may have herself had some Scandinavian ancestry, but given what we know about the average population of Normandy from the DNA results and all sorts of other sources, names, place names, language, things like that, we can say that by modern standards we can essentially call her French. So in that case, we would call, or she would be a Norman literally, but French by modern standards. So by that standards, we can say that William I, William the Conqueror, William the Bastard, William Duke of Normandy, was half French at least. Okay, now let's have a look at his father, Robert I the Magnificent. So Robert the Magnificent, Duke of Normandy, he was the father of William I. His father was Richard II of Duke of Normandy, and his mother was Judith of Brittany. Now let's look first at Judith of Brittany because we can draw a line under her. So Judith of Brittany was, in a nutshell, French, we can say by modern standards. So she was the daughter of Conan I, that's right, Conan I, Duke of Brittany, and Ermengarde Gerberga of Anjou. Okay, as you will well know, Brittany and Anjou are both very much in what we would today call France. Now, obviously, I could go into their ancestries, and they will split out into various different places, and they might have ancestry from outside of what we would now call France. But by and large, Judith of Brittany her parentage was by and large French. Okay, so we can call her French. So if we come back to the line here, we can say that William's mother was French and one of his grandmothers was French. Okay, so so far we've gone back through Robert the Magnificent to Richard II, Duke of Normandy. So let's have a look at Richard II's parentage. So Richard II, Duke of Normandy, his parents were Richard I, Duke of Normandy. You'll notice there we go from first to second, it's fairly simple. And his mother is only known as Gunnar or Gunnar. Okay, now if we go back to the tree for a second, Gunnar or Gunnora, as she's sometimes known, is pretty much a dead end, because again, much like William I's own mother, we don't really know anything for sure about her parentage. However, there are some things written about her. So if we pop over to the Wikipedia page again, it actually gives a fairly good summary of pretty much everything we know about her, which isn't very much. And it quite simply, it says her parents are unknown. However, there is a theory. Robert of Torigny says that her father was a forester from the Pays de Caux, and according to Dudo of Saint-Quentin, she was of noble Danish origin. Now that's kind of interesting, isn't it? And also the name Gunnar, absolutely, it's similar to names like Gunhild or anything like this. It does sound like a Scandinavian or even Anglo-Saxon name. It does sound Germanic. So it's possible that she might have Danish or other Scandinavian, possibly even Anglo-Saxon heritage. That doesn't mean that she's necessarily 100% Norse or Viking, whatever you want to call her, Scandinavian. But it might mean that she has some Scandinavian ancestry. So if we come back to the family tree again, what we can say here is we can hedge our bets, and let's just take the only source material we've got available. Let's say she's 100% Danish. I suppose it's not impossible that she has Danish ancestry at this date. It's possible that her grandparents were all immigrants from Denmark. So let's call her for now. Okay, so here we do have a Norse/Viking, if you want to use those slightly popular modern terms. And now let's look at Richard I of Normandy. Well, let's go back into his ancestry. So we go back to William I, we click on the page here. Right, his parents are Sprotta and William Longsword. What a brilliant name. Now, again, we'll deal with the woman because we know very little about her. Sprotta. So Sprotta it says, one of the sources says that she was a wife in the Viking fashion, okay, of William I, Duke of Normandy. Now, as it says down here, the first mention of her is by a contemporary called Flodoard, I think it is, Flodoard of Reims. And although he doesn't name her, he does describe he describes her as the Breton concubine. So there's some confusion here, okay? Where is she from? Now, that married in the Viking fashion also comes back, is mentioned in other sources where it describes a probable non-Christian marriage between them. And so it's possible that they still held secretly, or on the side, shall we say, pagan beliefs. And you've got to remember, this is a period when a lot of the Danish settlers, however many there were, to Normandy, would have originally been pagans. They would have been worshippers of Odin, Thor, Freya, and all the rest. And so whilst they might have become nominally Christian, they might have been christened, they very likely would have still kept worshipping the old gods on the side, and in some cases would have been married under the old gods and never bothered to get married in a Christian church. So it's an interesting and ambiguous period, the 900s, particularly in Normandy, and it has to be said in certain other areas of Europe as well. So her name, Sprotta, could be related to a name that we see in certain Anglo-Saxon sources, which could have a English or indeed a Danish origin, the name Sprot. And so this might hint at the fact, as she was also married in the Danish fashion, that she is not necessarily what we would now call French, but she is in fact a Scandinavian. So now let's look at the ancestry of William Longsword. Well, he is super easy because his parents are Rollo and Poppa. Okay, and in this case we know that Poppa was essentially French and Rollo was a Viking, if you want to call him that. So his origin, we don't really know. We'll call him Norse. We could call him a Dane, maybe in the terminology of the time. But he is a Northman of some sort. So he is Scandinavian. Okay, so we can say that William Longsword is categorically half French and half Norse, if you want to call him that. So let's try and work out what percentage Norse, or Viking if you want to use that term, Scandinavian, what percentage Norse was William the Conqueror, William the Bastard, William the First of England, King of England. Okay, so first off, we can say that his first generation after his parents, he is 50% French, we think, 50% French at least. Okay, we go to his father. Well, his father was 50% French at least. Okay, so we're down to possible 25% that we're debating now. Okay, the rest of it, 70%, at this level, 75% French, 25% unknown. So we go to Richard. Well, Richard's parents were Richard of Normandy, the first of Normandy, and Conqueror. Now, if we accept that Conqueror was indeed Scandinavian, if we are charitable and say that she was 100% Scandinavian, which is actually unlikely, but if we assume that she was, then that gives us 12.5% to work with of Norse, okay, or Northman. Now, if we look at Richard of Normandy, so we're now debating, we're on 75% French, 12.5% Norse, and then we're debating the final 12.5%. Of that final 12.5%, we have Richard is half William Longsword, which we'll talk about in a second, and half Sprotta. Now, Sprotta, again, if we're charitable and say that she was entirely Scandinavian, which she probably wasn't, but if we say that she was, okay, then that means that of the 12.5% who is Richard I of Normandy, at least 6.25% of him we shall say is Norse. Okay, now we go to William Longsword. So we're trying to work out what is that final 6.25%. Well, we know his father was 100% Norse, his mother was 100% French. So of that 6.25, we are left with 3.125. So if I've done my maths right here, we now have 12.5% plus 6.25% plus 3.125%, which again, if I've done my maths correct, leaves 21.875. Let's round up to 22%, just under, okay, percentage. So 22% for William the Conqueror. Now, again, I might have done my sums wrong then, correct me if I'm wrong. So obviously I've made some assumptions there. I have assumed that Conqueror is 100% Scandinavian. I've assumed that Sprotta is 100% Scandinavian. I have assumed that Heleva is 100% French. But I'm actually over-egging, I think, in that case. I'm probably over-egging the amount of Scandinavian input, certainly in the early part of the family tree, as it were. Okay, so William the Conqueror, on paper, seems to be between 21 and 22% of his ancestry was actually Scandinavian. So, was he a Viking? Well, clearly the straightforward answer is no. By the time you get this number of generations on from the original Viking settlers who were given the land, Rollo, William is in no way, shape or form a Viking. He is a Norman, he's the Duke of Normandy. He's essentially a Frankish or French nobleman, okay? He rides a horse, he uses a lance, he uses a long teardrop-shaped shield. He speaks French, although it's admittedly a Norman dialect of French. He is in every material way, really, genetics aside, in every material way, he is a Frenchman. He is a Duke of France, okay? Duke being an ancient established rank amongst the Frankish kingdom. So the fact is that no, he's not a Viking. Is he Scandinavian? Does he have Norse roots? Well, yes, absolutely he has Norse roots. His ancestry goes back to Rollo. And it's entirely possible, if we go back through Heleva, for example, who we know nothing about, his mother, if we go back through Heleva, it's entirely possible Heleva has some Scandinavian ancestors as well, but which we don't know about. However, I would argue that I think it's unlikely, okay? Just statistically, if she's a commoner, the likelihood is that all of her common ancestors are going to be indigenous to the region of Normandy, in other words, Franks or Gauls, going back before the Viking era. So, On the most simplistic note, we could say, was his father a Scandinavian? Well, no, his father is only a fraction of Scandinavian as well. So quite simply, even in genetic terms, even being as favourable to the Scandinavian input as we possibly can be, William the Conqueror, if I've done my maths right, is only 21.8% Scandinavian. Therefore, majority of his genetic input is native French. Okay, so yes, absolutely he has Norse ancestry. How important was the Norse ancestry? Not that much. I mean, obviously the establishment of Normandy owes its origins to the Scandinavians and to the Viking invaders, essentially. It definitely owes something to them in terms of their culture, but not an awful lot and not very much in genetic terms. And it does seem, based on the latest genetic tests, at least looking at the Y chromosomes, we haven't necessarily looked at the mitochondrial DNA side of things, the women's side of the genetic story, but it does seem that even if we're just looking at the conquerors, the rulers, you know, the men maybe, who came into that area and established a ruling elite, it does seem that they were probably a genetic minority as well, like Rollo. So, my conclusion is, based on what I can tell from the known ancestry and bringing in some of the genetic data as well from the latest research, were the Normans Vikings? No, they did owe something to their Norse origins. They did get some names and some genetic input and some things of their dialect, absolutely, and the existence of Normandy. So 100% yes, they owe something to their Norse ancestry. Were they overall Vikings or Norse? No, they weren't. And even the rulers, even like William, Duke of Normandy, was only about a fifth of his genetic input was from his Norse ancestry. The other 4/5 were predominantly native French. I hope that's been interesting. I'm looking forward to you correcting anything I've said below, because I'm sure I've got some things a little bit skewed, a little bit wrong there. Hopefully my percentages are right. I will double check them now. But I'm always looking forward to your comments down below. Check out the links below as always. I hope I'll see you back on the channel really soon. Cheers for watching, folks. I am Matt Easton, and I will be again next time. Cheers. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.